go a little bit further than that this time. And like there are a lot of webinars. We're still, many of us, coming off of the high of clock and being in person for a number of days. And so I'm actually going to try to keep this pretty tight time-wise. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I actually can't see them because I'm sharing my full screen, but Colin will jump in and read them out to me. So the topic for today's shorter discussion is how to secure budget for legal tech. And I thought that it might make sense to start off by giving some backgrounds regarding why I might be uniquely positioned to talk about this topic. So a little bit about me. I'm Kevin Cohn. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Brightflag. And I have 17 years, the number keeps getting larger, 17 years of technology executive management experience. And at Brightflag, I'm responsible for all of our go-to-market, so marketing, alliances, sales, and customer success. So I have a lot of experience, that is to say, with helping companies to buy things that they want to buy. And I have a lot of experience with being unsuccessful in helping companies to buy things that they want to buy. And this webinar is going to be about some of those learnings and how companies can be more successful in actually making a purchase. So for pretty much the entirety of those 17 years, I've been responsible for sales, which is the opposite of the buying piece. And I've negotiated and or sold about $350 million in total contract value at this point. So I wouldn't go so far as to say that I've seen it all, because no one ever sees it all, but I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot work, I've seen a lot not work, and I've picked out over this time a number of things that successful buyers do consistently well. And in my opinion, that makes the difference between their being able to get that budget and maybe they're having to postpone or cancel the project. And finally, a really big supporter of everything that Colin and the team is doing with legal operators, and I'm a member of the advisory board. And so giving you further context around this, and I don't know why there's a photo of me on the previous slide, because obviously I'm right here, right? So this is me, this is what I look like. A little bit about Brightflag. We're a legal technology provider. We're the AI-powered system for legal teams to control their budget. So that's not just outside counsel spend, but all non-compensation spend, to really be in a position where you can confidently say, this is how much we plan to spend, this is how much we are spending, this is what's driving those things, and this is what the future is going to look like in terms of our budget. We have hundreds of customers across the US, Europe, and beyond, into Asia, Pacific, and Latin America at this point. And these last two pieces are really important. For most of our customers, for almost all of our customers, Brightflag was their first legal tech purchase. And so we have a lot of experience working through this challenge with customers of how they can go about getting budget for legal tech that in many cases they haven't bought before. They haven't gotten that budget successfully before. And finally, we have over a 99% implementation success rate, typically in under 45 days. My guess is that this is the first time that you've ever heard a vendor admit that they don't have a 100% success rate with implementations. Once you get into the hundreds of customers, it becomes mathematically very challenging to not have had one implementation that didn't work out, for whatever reason. So, and actually the implementation that didn't work out is related to some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So, so let's dive in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Brightflags to start us off, to give some context to this conversation, because I have a sort of overarching thesis for why teams struggle to get budget and then what they can do to get it. I'm going to start off by sort of giving you a peek behind the curtains of how Brightflag is doing. There's a lot of good news and there's some less good news, and it's going to help to inform this conversation that we're having today. So in preparing for this, I went and I looked at every single sale or potential sale that we were involved in last year, so in 2022. There were hundreds of them, hundreds and hundreds of these. And we use a CRM system, Salesforce, to manage all of our sales efforts. And so I looked to pick out some data from this. 35% of the sales that we participated in last year we ended up winning. 15% of them we lost to one of our competitors. There are a lot of great companies in this space. And 50% of them, half of them, the buyer ended up doing nothing. So 3 takeaways here. Number one, 70% of the time that a legal ops team makes a decision to buy something like Brightflag, they choose Brightflag. That's great. I mean, we're very happy about that. But at the same time, we don't win almost 2/3 of the deals that we participate in. Now, how can it be possible that we're winning 70% of the decisions, but we're not winning 65% of the deals that we participate in? And the answer is that half of these deals, they end up getting paused or canceled, right? The buyers aren't able to buy. So let's double click into that, because as you can see, that's a really significant portion of what we're doing. And it's a really significant portion of what you're doing. 1 out of every 2, they don't go anywhere. And let's sort of drill down into what's driving that, right? So when we disqualify, what we call disqualify a deal because it goes to a no decision, we further capture the reason behind why that happens. And there are 4 of them that we have, and I'll explain what each of them means. So the first one, exogenous event, it roughly translates as like poop happens. Companies go through layoffs right before they're about to make a purchase. Company gets acquired, company goes through a major restructuring. Any of these things, we classify them as exogenous events. And basically what that means is it was out of the buyer's hands and it was out of our hands. Now that doesn't represent a significant portion of the deals, but it happens. Then there's this other portion of deals where we call poor qualification. And we think that this is going to be an opportunity where it's the right kind of customer for us and we have a good solution for them. And then they don't end up buying anything. And we never should have been thinking that they would buy anything. That's the sort of cover your face, cover your eyes, and try to forget that you made a mistake. Then there's this chunk, unconvinced. That's the red slice of the pie. That's where we feel that we didn't succeed in convincing the legal team that Brightflag in this case would be a valuable thing for them to add to their legal technology stack. These are the ones that frustrate us the most because it was within our control, we feel, right? But then there's this largest chunk, the orange chunk here. 63% of the deals that don't go anywhere, it's because the team isn't able to buy. They want to, but they're not able to make it happen. And that's a really fascinating thing. So 1/3 of our deals, 63% of 50%, 1/3 of our deals, they don't happen even though the head of legal ops wants to buy. So that's a really, really significant portion of the conversations that we end up having. And that necessarily means a lot of you are in the same situation. You want to buy a piece of legal tech, but you just aren't able to make it happen. And so the point of this webinar, just before I move on, that inability to buy, finding yourself in that situation where you want to get something, you might personally have a lot of conviction that this is necessary, this is the right thing, you even found your preferred vendor, you feel that you're going to get value out of it, and still it doesn't happen. You might think that that impacts smaller companies or more junior people or companies that are currently having a rough stretch from a performance perspective. But actually none of those things is true. This inability to buy, it's universal. It's not tied to any of these qualities. It's more tied to how you go about trying to buy something. So we find that not being able to buy when you want to, it impacts experienced senior heads of legal ops, just as it does more junior and less experienced people. We find that it impacts large companies just as often as it impacts small companies, large teams, small teams, companies that are delivering good financial results, companies that are delivering less good financial results. It happens pretty consistently across the board. And especially recently, what we have found through our data is that it doesn't even matter if buying this particular type of legal tech was in the budget at the start of the year, because everyone has ripped up that budget and recreated it a number of times at this point. We're almost halfway through the year. So it really comes down to your ability to follow a small set of best practices to secure that budget, to secure that buy-in, and effectively and eventually get to a purchase. So the purpose of this webinar, if you go back to that first slide that I flashed up, we win 35%, we lose 15% to a competitor, and then 50%, the biggest chunk, they end up buying nothing. So that's a 50-50 split between people who end up buying something and people who can't buy something. What can we learn from the 50% that do end up being able to buy, right? What are the behaviors that we can mirror that will put us in a position where we've secured that budget and we're able to get a system, whatever it is, up and running? So I've boiled it down to 5 recommendations. I'll take you through each of them and answer questions as we go or at the end. So the first recommendation, and this is particularly important in today's climate, but it's always important, make the CFO your champion, right? Make the CFO the person in the organization that is pushing to buy and implement the kind of legal tech that you want to go off and buy and implement. Now, if you're working in a really large organization, you might not have access to the CFO, him or herself, so you might be getting the buy-in of the head of FP&A or the head of accounting, but your finance business partner, but someone with influence in the finance organization needs to be your champion. Not just involved in the process, not just consulted, not just thinking that it's a good idea. They need to be forcefully advocating for doing what you want to do. And so here are a few specific recommendations for how you can go about making the CFO your champion. The first is front load the conversation. Have the conversation with the CFO or your representative in finance as the first thing in the process of considering buying legal tech, not the last. I can't tell you how many times we have engaged with really senior, really experienced heads of legal ops and gone, weeks or in some cases months into an evaluation process where the general counsel is involved, IT is involved, attorneys are involved, other members of the legal ops team are involved, only to get to a point where finance gets sort of looped in to see if they have any questions, and finance says, either not budgeted or we don't think it's a good idea for reasons X, Y, Z. And, not front loading this conversation with finance fails to recognize that in most organizations, the person that ultimately has the final say on whether or not something is going to be bought is not the GC, it's not even the CEO, it's the CFO. So by front loading the conversation, by making that person your best friend and your champion, you are far more likely to get that budget and to be able to make the purchase that you're looking to make. The second recommendation here is to speak their language, to speak the CFO's language. And the CFO's language is money. If the CFO asks, what is the value of this going to be? Your answer has to be a number. It can't be a paragraph of text. It can't be the word efficiency. It can't be that people are going to be happier. All of those things are important, but at the end of the day, the answer to a question from finance must be a financial amount. Right? And then related to that, especially in an environment like this where cash is king, you have to prioritize the hard value of any legal tech over the soft value. Now, hard value might be revenue acceleration. It might be the ability to avoid hiring people that are in the plan to be hired. It might be the ability to continue delivering business as usual with a smaller number of people than you currently have, because that has a financial component to it. It could be cost savings, although typically cost savings alone will not be enough to get budget for legal tech because costs are not as important as revenue. So prioritize hard value over the soft. These are surefire ways to be able to make the CFO your champion. And I would encourage you to be intellectually honest with yourself. If the CFO or a senior stakeholder in finance is not on board with your initiative, it is very likely that it's going to get derailed before you're able to make a purchase. And you'll have exhausted a lot of time and energy in the process. So recommendation number one, make the CFO your champion. Recommendation number two, connect with top-level goals. There was a time in late 2020, early 2021, really all through 2021, where it seemed like a lot of people were able to make a lot of legal tech purchases because everyone's stock prices were going up. Everyone was able to raise more funding, fairly easily at very high valuations. And so buying legal tech, it wasn't a question of do we have budget for this? It was a question of what's the next thing that we should do, and let's just sort of steamroll into doing it. And so don't get me wrong, that wasn't a universally bad thing. A lot of legal teams took advantage of that kind of environment in a good way and now have legal tech that if they were trying to buy it today, it might have been much more difficult for them to buy it. And of course, legal tech vendors have benefited from that as well. But buying was a lot easier back then, and buying is very difficult today. And selling is very difficult today because buying is difficult. And so you have to connect with top-level goals. It can't just be the next thing to do. There has to be a substantive business reason. And so here are some specific recommendations for how you can connect your legal tech initiative with top-level goals so that you can secure that budget. The first one is to remember that the company's goals, the very, very top-level goals, are more important, therefore more likely to get you budget than your legal team's goals, which are far more important than your individual goals as a member of the team. Not that there's anything unimportant about your individual goals or even the legal team goals, but the higher up you can go on that stack, the more likely you are to be able to secure budget. The second is to focus on what we at Brightflag call emotional drivers rather than surface pains. So let me tell you sort of what this means. Let's pretend that you hurt your leg, all right? And you've got some pain in your leg. There's a big difference between it being a nuisance. It's a little painful when I walk, but I can walk. There's some discomfort, but I can walk. I can actually even run. In fact, I'm on a soccer team, and I can even play in the soccer games. Now, when I get home, I'm sore, I'm achy, and I sort of wish I hadn't played soccer, but I played and it went fine. There's a big difference between that and I've hurt my leg so much that I am unable to play soccer. That's a much deeper level impact, and I'm emotionally impacted by not being able to play because it's something that I look forward to, it's something that I enjoy. So surface pains, people live with surface pains all day, every day. Each of us probably could quickly write a list of all of the things that are happening in our company right now that sort of bother us, but they're not going to cause us to leave the company. They're not going to cause us to be really unhappy about being there. They're not really meaningfully impacting the results. They're nuisances. But there's a much, much smaller list of these big issues, these really big pains, these emotional drivers, where if they aren't addressed, then nothing else matters, right? So you have to connect your legal tech initiatives with emotional drivers, not with surface pains. If someone would feel better about themselves or their work or the results if you put this legal tech in place, that's good, but it's not enough. You have to go deeper. And so the final piece here is you have to work from these top level goals, not to them, not towards them. So this is a little bit of mindset, but when you approach it one way versus the other, I think what you would see if you went through a thought exercise is it's really easy if you try to work towards the goals to rationalize that what you're trying to do does in fact align with them. But when you work from first principles and you say, what are the goals? What does that mean in terms of the obstacles? What does that potentially mean in terms of solutions? So when you work from them, it's much more reasoned thinking about just how important a particular initiative might be and how effectively a particular type of legal tech might contribute to the achievement of those top level goals. So that's the second recommendation, is to connect with top level goals. Here's the third one: pursue unique solutions only. Now, this is a really tricky thing because there's so much enterprise technology in place today. Most organizations have, pretty much every organization has a system like Zoom or WebEx, some sort of a communications platform, something like Slack or Teams for communication. And then most organizations have something like SharePoint or OneDrive or Dropbox or Box, so somewhere to store all of their documents, Google Drive, things like that. And so the more enterprise technology that a company has in place, the more opportunity there is for overlap between multiple technology solutions. It might be two enterprise technology solutions, it might be an enterprise technology solution and a legal tech solution. And so in order to maximize the chances of your getting budget for your initiative, you really have to focus on the types of solutions, the types of legal tech solutions that are truly unique, that would provide differentiated value and a solution to a particular problem that the existing slate of enterprise technology can't address. Not can address, but not great, can't address. So what does that mean in practice? The first is, and not everyone will enjoy doing this, you need to make a real effort to use existing solutions first. I'll give you an example from Brightflag's universe. Brightflag is legally billing and matter management software. And one of the alternatives to using a system like Brightflag is to just rely on finance and the accounts payable system to do the work for you. Review invoices in Coupa or Oracle or Bill.com or whatever it is. Get reporting on legal spend through those systems. Most organizations in the world actually solve the problem of outside counsel management that way. I don't think they solve it very well. I don't think they're very happy doing it, but that is what they're doing today. If you don't make a real effort to use the existing solution first, then at least one of the following two things is going to happen. Number one, you're going to get budget pushback from the people who are responsible for those systems because they feel like they might be able to solve the problem for you. All right. And so even if you have determined beyond a reasonable doubt that that is impossible, because you haven't made the effort, you're going to have a real uphill battle in convincing them, and they're going to find a way to block your budget. But the second reason is you might be wrong. There are a lot of categories of legal tech and a lot of features of certain legal tech solutions where it would be perfectly fine to use existing enterprise technology. I don't think that Brightflag and accounts payable systems are a great example of that, but there certainly are examples. For example, I've seen a lot of legal teams struggle with getting budget for a legal document management system because their IT teams in particular and their finance teams feel that there is too much overlap between what that legal document management system might do and what SharePoint or Google Drive might do. So if you don't make a real effort to use the existing solution first, then you are not going to be in a position where you can say with confidence, with specificity, that this is why we need a unique solution to solve this problem. And you're also not going to get the buy-in for budget from the people who own those existing systems. So related to this is this sort of notion that being incrementally better is rarely worth the effort. And that means that if you're proposing something that will be incrementally better, it's very unlikely that you're going to get budget to go off and buy that thing. Incrementally better, you know, I sort of think about it this way, and I would encourage you to think about it this way. What we have is fine. It's not great, but it gets the job done. You know, nothing is falling apart. If that is actually the situation, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting budget for a legal tech purchase because it's just not worth the effort. Not only are you spending more money with a vendor on an additional product, but you're also having to go through an implementation. Then you've got ongoing management of that system, training overhead, usability overheads for having multiple systems. Incrementally better rarely is worth the effort. You need to be finding something that is truly unique and is really going to move the needle. And then finally, framing matters. And I guess that's a little bit of a legal pun, but it's not meant to be. How you go about framing a legal tech initiative really makes a difference. Again, from the Brightflag world, I'll give you an example. The sort of category name that most people use to describe systems like Brightflag is e-billing. What happens when you go to a finance team, to a CFO, and say, you know, we, legal, we want to buy an e-billing system, is a lot of the time they say, why? We just implemented an enterprise-wide e-billing system. You should use that. Every other team is using that. By calling it e-billing, you are creating this problem that might not have existed if you had instead said, hey, we make heavy use of outside counsel, and we need a system of record to manage the engagement with outside counsel from top to bottom, right? Nobody in the finance team is going to say, oh yeah, you can use our accounts payable system to do that, because outside counsel management is much more broad than just receiving, approving, and paying invoices. So how you talk about these challenges that you're looking to solve makes a really big difference. You know, you can think about it similarly for contract management. If you describe a contract management initiative as being, you know, bringing together, contract requester self-service, reusing the best clauses and making sure that there's consistency, and being able to close deals faster, then you're very unlikely to have someone in procurement say, oh yeah, we have this procurement system that also has a contracting module, because you have framed the problems to be solved differently. So think very carefully about what existing solutions, you know, are in the company, how much better the legal tech that you are considering purchasing would be than repurposing those existing tools, and think about how you're going to describe the problems that you're looking to solve in a way that reinforces the differences rather than the similarities. All right, so that's recommendation number 3, pursue unique solutions only. Recommendation number 4, don't take shortcuts. People take a lot of shortcuts. And I understand it. You know, when you are excited about a project, when you see a real opportunity to bring something into an organization and to drive change, that excitement, that enthusiasm, that internal confidence, it can power you through a lot of obstacles, but it can also make you blind to some of the obstacles. You get tunnel vision, and you don't think about all of the other steps that are important to take so that you're able to secure that budget, and you don't have anyone showing up and saying, that doesn't make sense, I'm canceling the budget. So here are my recommendations for avoiding shortcuts. The first is to create a 5-year operating model. If you are working in legal operations, then you're working at a company that is already doing, at a minimum, tens of millions of dollars in revenue every year, but more likely hundreds of millions or billions of dollars a year in revenue. And companies at that scale do not make decisions with a 1-year time horizon. When you're buying something on behalf of your company, you need to be thinking about what this is going to look like over a 3 to 5 year time horizon, right? You're buying it because you think it's going to work. How is that going to play out over the horizon of time? So create a 5-year operating model as part of your effort to get budget. Now, what's an operating model? An operating model consists of the financials. So how much is this going to cost? How much is it going to cost to pay the vendor each year, either in one-time fees or subscription fees? How much is it going to cost in terms of internal resourcing? Are we able to resource this with fractions of existing people on the team, or are we going to need to go higher either now or later? Who's going to need to be involved from IT, from finance, from legal, from all of these different teams? And what is that operating cadence going to look like? The more thoroughly you can put together this kind of a model, the more robust you can make it, the less likely it is that someone's going to be able to poke a hole in it and say, yeah, the budget that you're looking for doesn't actually cover all of the costs of doing this. Here's additional cost and additional cost and additional cost. And all of a sudden, you're on the back foot and you're not going to get that budget. So once you've developed this 5-year operating model, it's important to test it. Test it with legal, with your leadership team, with attorneys, with paralegals, support staff. Test it with IT. Of course, test it with finance. Test it with multiple vendors. So before you've even started an evaluation, you can build out this operating model and say, I'm trying to get budget to buy a product like yours. And this is the operating model that I've put together because I want to make sure that I have a really good understanding of the advantages, the value that it's going to create, but also all of the costs. And talk to multiple vendors because you're going to get different perspectives. You're going to get different numbers. Some vendors are probably going to tell you, it won't cost you that much. But other vendors are going to say, you're probably going to need to come back to us for this kind of help, in year 3, something like that. And so by testing it both internally and with multiple external vendors, you're able to make this operating model really robust. And then when you go to the CFO, because you're trying to make this person your champion, you're going to say, here's the model, right? I'm not just coming to you and saying, I think it's going to pay for itself in 6 months, or I think that, the vendor said we're going to get an 8x ROI or something like that. But I have done the homework. I've done the diligence. I have produced this document, which is written in your language, money, the language of business, and it tells us what this is going to look like, right? This is a really important key to getting that budget. All right, and finally, recommendation number 5, and this is a sort of, these are roughly given in priority order, but this one arguably should have been the first. Ask gut check, Monday. Ask gut check questions, right? Ask these questions that are uncomfortable to ask, where if you start to go, oh, I don't know what the answer is to this question, you know that you should stop the initiative because you're not going to get budget. It's not the right thing to do. And here are the 3 gut check questions, and I'm sure that you could think of more. The first one, should this be my top priority right now? My very strong opinion, again, I've been doing this for 17 years. I've been leading large teams, been the executive responsible for large teams. If something is not the top priority, not a top priority, the top priority, then you shouldn't be doing it. That's the truth. And if that means that, some of you on this call are thinking about buying an e-billing system right now, and I just said that and you think, well, no, it's my second priority, and we end up losing a customer as a result, that's okay. You should be buying legal tech if buying that particular piece of legal tech is your top priority right now. So if the answer to that question is yes, okay, you can continue on. If the answer to that question is no, then you should, at a minimum, take a pause, yellow flag, but more likely it's a red flag. Shelve it for now, come back when it is the top priority. Second gut check question. Would my chief legal officer or GC go to the mat for this? Let's pretend that you've done all the work, you've tentatively gotten approval for budget from finance, and then something happens. IT shows up and says, we are responsible for all technology that gets implemented at this company, and we don't see the point in doing this, or we don't have capacity to do it right now, so we're putting the kibosh on it. Is your GC going to say, well, that's what IT said, or is your GC going to call up the CTO and say, or the CIO and say, let me explain why this has to happen, right? So are they really going to go to the mat for your legal tech initiative? If they're passive about it, or if they say something like, I trust you, I'm delegating this to you. On the one hand, I understand that feels good. We all want to be trusted and empowered, but you need that person to say, I'm delegating the execution to you, but this has to get done. And if you run into any barriers, you come to me and I'm going to help you work through those obstacles, right? If you don't have that kind of a dialogue, if your CLO or GC is not ready to fight for this initiative, then I can guarantee you, especially in this economic climate, you are not going to get that budget. And finally, the last gut check question, would this be a painkiller or would it be a vitamin? So roughly speaking, a painkiller means there is something wrong right now and it has to be made better or else it's going to keep getting worse. A vitamin is, let's sort of stay as good as we are and maybe get a little bit better, right? So you can live without your vitamins. At a certain point, you can't live without your painkillers. And you have to be intellectually honest with yourself. Is what I'm looking to buy, is what I'm looking to get budget for here, is it a painkiller or is it a vitamin? It is really easy to fall into the trap of answering that question with a yes. Would this be a painkiller or a vitamin? Yeah, it would be both of them. You need to be sharper than that, right? These solutions are either vitamins or they're painkillers, and over time they can become vitamins because there are additional, more strategic, longer-term uses. But first and foremost, a solution is either a painkiller or a vitamin. Right now, I'm not seeing a lot of teams get budget for vitamins, right? So you really got to focus on those painkillers, on the things that are top priorities, on those things where the GC is going to be standing with you shoulder to shoulder, convincing the CFO, the CIO, the CEO, anyone who stands in the way of this legal tech budget being approved. This is absolutely necessary, and these are the reasons why. So that's it, really. Summarizing, despite best efforts, despite desire, despite seniority and experience, 50% of legal tech purchases end up getting derailed, right? They don't end up resulting in a purchase. And across all of them, about a third, that's the case, not because the company decides, I don't need something like Brightflag, or, Brightflag isn't the right solution, but because they don't get budget, right? A third. And a lot of the time, a lot of work is done before you find out, yep, no budget. So these are the 5 recommendations that I've made for how you can get budget or at least avoid spinning your wheels, doing a lot of work, and then finding out that you're not going to get the budget. So number 1, make the CFO your champion. Don't come to them at the last minute and say, we just need to get finance's sort of stamp of approval on this, or we want to make sure they understand what it's going to mean, or see if they have any questions. No. Have a senior stakeholder be the champion, be leading the charge with you to put this kind of legal tech in place. Number 2, connect with top-level goals. Don't think about yourself first and foremost. Think about the company, and after that, the team, and work back from those top-level goals to make sure that you really are working on the most important thing, and this legal tech project is going to move the needle. Number 3, you can't ignore all of the technology that your company already has in place. You need to critically evaluate how much of that could I use or reuse, and frame what you're trying to do carefully so that it's very clear that there's little or ideally no overlap. Number 4, Don't take shortcuts. Don't be the thumbs person. Don't be the person that said, my boss told me that this is entirely up to me and nobody else needs to be involved, and I'll sort of coordinate a little bit. We all have pride. We would all like to have influence and responsibility and control. The reality is 100% of business purchases are done as a committee, right? There are no buying committees of one. It doesn't matter how talented you are, how talented anyone is. We all work in teams. And so you can't short circuit that 5-year operating plan and getting feedback from all of the different stakeholders, not on the solution that you're looking at, but on the need for a solution in the first place, because that's when the budget decision is made. Is this something we're going to fund or not? And finally, be honest with yourself. Ask these gut check questions. Is this my top priority right now? Not is it one of my top priorities, because that's a fallacy. Is it my top priority, right? Is my GC going to stand shoulder to shoulder with me to make sure that this budget gets approved and that this purchase happens? And is it truly unique, right? Is it really going to move the needle for the business? So I hope that you found that helpful. Okay, I haven't spoken a lot about Bright Flag in this webinar because I spend plenty of time talking about Bright Flag, and the purpose of this webinar is not to sell you on Bright Flag. It's to hopefully empower you with ideas for how you can go about securing the budget for legal tech, whatever it is. Maybe it's eBilling, maybe it's Bright Flag, but maybe it's something completely unrelated. All that having been said, of course, I have a strong perspective that if the most important thing to do to secure, the CFO as a champion is to speak the language of business, and the language of business is money, then I think that a legal team taking control of their finances and having real conviction around what's driving the budget is a really important thing. And that's what Bright Flag helps legal teams to do. So, if you're interested in learning more about Bright Flag or seeing a demo, you can go to brightflag.com/demo. There's also a ton of educational material on our website. We do a lot of work in supporting the legal operations community. So we've got the Legal Operations Compensation Survey there. We've got a podcast which interviews people from across the legal operations spectrum, sharing their stories about how they grew their careers, how they got budget for their legal tech purchases, all of these things. So a lot of really useful information on the website, even if Bright Flag and eBilling are not on your radar at all. So I hope that you found that useful, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have now.
It looks like one question came in earlier on. That was an excellent webinar, by the way. Some great information. And you only mentioned Bright Flag 11 times, so
I'll let you recount as examples.
At what stage, early stage startups start integrating the solution, Bright Flag?
So I don't know if this question was about Bright Flag specifically or legal tech more generally. So, I'll answer both. Legal tech generally, it really depends on the nature of the product that you're considering. There are a set of technologies that I think lend themselves to companies even at very early stages. Elements of contract management are a good example of this. Okay, so contract management, CLM, it's a very big category with many different components in it. And until you get to a certain scale, a lot of those components are not actually going to be super valuable. But the basic automation of high volume agreements, like NDAs, for example, will start to save a lot of time, even at a very early stage in development. I'll pick a counter example. Legal hold is a really important technology, a really important legal tech category. But until you get to a point where you are receiving, a high volume of threats of litigation or threats of discovery, you do not need to buy a legal hold system, right? So those are sort of two opposite ends of the spectrum, and it really is going to depend on the nature of your business. If you are a startup social network, for example, you're going to be getting a lot of services of process, and you should probably look at something like Safari SOP sooner rather than later. Similarly, if you are a biotech startup, you're probably going to want to look at something like Brightflag very early on, because legal expenses, outside counsel expenses, end up being very, very high very early on in the company's life because of all of the intellectual property work. So it really depends on the category of legal tech. With Brightflag specifically, with the e-billing outside counsel management category, what we typically say is that if you have at least $2 million in spend with law firms every year, or if you are growing into that level of spend over the course of a year, that's usually a really good time to bring it on board. But if you're only spending, $200,000 a year with law firms, then it really doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter what the price is. It just doesn't make sense at that point in time.
Yep. No, just add on to that, it's like a CLM. If you have a heavy IP company, you're going to do a lot of NDAs, right? So you want to have a system really
Definitely.
early for that as well.
Yeah.
It looks like, I know you like to give time back. It looks like that's all the questions that came in, and you covered a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah, as you know, Colin, I see a number of names on the attendee list that I recognize and I'm friends with. I think the most important thing for a legal tech vendor to do is to tell you the truth. To tell you the truth, especially if it's not what you want to hear, or it's not what you think that they want to say to you. So I would love to do a webinar and say, hey, everybody, you should buy a system like Brightflag. In fact, you should buy Brightflag because you're going to save more money and you're going to do it faster and it's going to be better in all of these different ways. But that's not how people make decisions. It's definitely not how people should make decisions. And so we feel very strongly that by talking about the right sort of first principles and the right way to think about the challenges that all legal teams go through when they're trying to secure budget for legal tech, that will ultimately create more value for the community. And if it's creating more value for the community, then it will also create more value for Brightflag. So again, I hope it was valuable, and I hope that you do something fun with the 10 minutes that you're getting back. And feel free to drop me a note directly, kevin.cohn@brightflag.com, if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. That was excellent. Hey, folks, thank you so much for spending your time here with us today. We'll follow up with a copy of the recording. And if you have any questions, Kevin, will you share the deck if some folks want that?
Absolutely. Definitely.
Okay. Awesome. Just reach out if you want the deck as well. We'll make that happen. Hi, Courtney, Tom, Allison.
Thanks,
Everyone else,
everyone.
have a great day. Thank you.
Take care.